Or is it just us?
Oh, man. You don't need anybody but us.
There's got to be some budget geeks out there.
Some budget keys at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
With the 200K increase.
Oh, there's somebody.
There's somebody.
Trina Brown Hicks is on.
Okay, good. Hello, Trina.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is 4:02 on Monday, October the 25th, and we are here for a special meeting of the Mayor and City Council to discuss proposed amendments to the budget, this current year's budget, FY22. And this is a program that is brought about by several changes that have happened. And I think, Lorraine, you're going to offer us most of this information, correct?
I will do my best.
Great, thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Okay, so everyone should have in front of them a list of the recommended changes to the FY 2022 adopted budget. We are bringing forth recommendations to amend the 22 budget based upon a recommendation from our auditors who suggested that a number of years ago. It's a way for us to kind of identify accounts where when we approved the adopted budget, maybe we were a little low in some areas or a little high, so we review it and we identify those areas. There may be projects that we are no longer going to be doing that were once approved, or there may be projects we're going to be doing in the current year, so we identify those as well. So before I get into the list of changes, I was going to kind of review and show you how the short document ties into the bigger document.
Okay.
So the two-page double-sided document is a list of all the recommended changes. If you look in the column to the left, it says page and budget. That page number refers to the budget page, the larger document. And we identified the page number, the account description, and then the next column is, are we recommending an increase or a decrease in that line? A decrease is in red. And then to the right is the reason why we are recommending that budget number get increased or decreased. So then if you go to your budget document, on page 1, it's a summary of all of the city's funds: general fund, municipal street aid, general capital projects, the transfer tax, all of them. The top part are the revenues, and the middle part or the bottom is the expenditures. Again, you have a page number to the left that you can refer to give more specific and detailed information to back up those budget numbers. We are showing the budgets for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So 2020 is just to the right of the account description. Then we did an amendment, actually we did 2 amendments in 2020. The second one is showing. And then the actual, what we ended with in March 31, 2020. That same information is presented for 2021, and 2022 are in the last columns. The actual for FY 2022 is as of September 30th. The proposed amended budget, which is the second column from the right, incorporates all of the proposed changes from the shorter document. They've been incorporated into that column. And then the last column is the percentage change when you look at the proposed amended budget and the adopted budget for FY22. Now, just for clarification, when I say FY22, we started FY22 in March of this year. I'm sorry, April of this year.
April.
We will end it in March of 22.
Right.
So that's our fiscal year. We don't run on a calendar year.
Right.
So if you go to page 2 of the larger document, this gets into the general fund. This is our largest and most active fund in the whole city. Our operating, our day-to-day expenses get paid out of the general fund. So because it's such a large fund, again, you're going to see page numbers on the left that refer you to detail for each of those departments, committees, and commissions. And the same information is presented, FY 2020, FY 2021, and FY 2022. At the bottom of that page, you see a listing of all of the unrestricted cash accounts, including the investment accounts for the general fund. When we look at general capital projects, you'll see the cash accounts and investments for general capital projects. The same is true for the transfer tax, the cash and the investments for transfer tax. Are there any questions on how these two documents relate?
No.
Okay. All right, so now
Thanks for the explanation.
Oh, sure.
Very useful.
And all of this, just for anybody who's on the line, I think we only have Trina, but it'll all be, you'll
It's
post
all
all
up
of
there
it.
now.
Okay,
Yep.
terrific. Thank you.
Sure. So let's look at the shorter document. When we prepared this document, we reviewed all the revenues and expenditures for all the city funds. And we looked at, are we on track with the budget that we established? If not, then do we anticipate going above budget or being under budget? Are we looking at revenues that are a one-time fund? For example, the franchise for cable. We get that one time a year. Some of them, the expenditure side of it, some of the expenditures are winding down, such as parking and lifeguard. So if we see that we're above budget now, then there's probably a good chance that we could reduce those to be more realistic of what we have spent. So when you see in the reason column, adjusted based on projection, that's where we've looked at it and said, we think that based from October to March, we're either going to come in higher than budget or lower than budget. If you see adjusted to actual, then we know with pretty good certainty that we are going to end up with revenue at that level. So we've adjusted it to be what it is.
So Fred, in the example that you gave a minute ago about the cable entry,
Yes.
that is showing that there's an adjusted to actual of $10,000?
Yes.
So that is $10,000 over what had been
Yes.
projected, is that correct?
We budgeted $142,000. It
Right.
came in $152,000.
Got it, thank you.
Yes. Where we do not state adjusted based on projection, adjusted to actual, we've tried to identify why the change is needed. For example, the first one, it's on page 3 in the budget, but it's account 100-415-0000, rentals, Great Marsh.
Right.
They have a lease agreement, and it specifically says they are required to pay $6,500. We budgeted $6,000. So we are increasing that $500, and that's why we stated adjusted to lease agreement.
Right.
That is adjustment that was due to a new lease.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that
Absolutely.
explanation.
Common sense.
Building permits. We've had some discussion previously that the city received a sizable building permit for the assisted senior living project. We have removed the net of that building permit. And when I say net, we've taken what we received, but the city is going to have an expenditure to that for the
Right.
inspections. So those expenditures total $56,000. So we've taken the gross of that permit, reduced it by the expense, but we still expect for us to end up higher than where we budgeted. That's why we're still showing an increase to that line of $120,000.
Right. And by the way, that line item would be applicable for all permits, correct?
Correct.
The example you gave was for a particular
Particular,
permit, but it's
specific.
for all permits, right?
Just an example.
Right.
Well, but the point that she was making with that is that it was removed, even after it was removed from the general fund revenue, we're still trending ahead.
Right, right.
Yeah, no,
I understand.
And when I did the projection, I looked at where were we last year from October to March to kind of gauge, are we thinking we're going to be ahead or are we going to be lagging?
Right, good. Right.
All right, the next one is the 100-423-0400 L&P subdivision income.
Right,
We're recommending an increase of $10,050, and this is specific to the study that Fisher's Cove was required to have. AECom did it. The city paid the bills. The city paid bills totaling $10,050. So we received a deposit from Fisher Cove. That's why we're recognizing income of $10,050 to offset that expense.
It'll be an offsetting expense later on.
It's already showing in there,
I mean,
yes.
but we'll discover it later on.
Yes. I can go through each one, or if you want me to identify some ones, I do want to draw some attention to tennis courts, which is on page 6, 100-469, 4200. You're going to see a reduction of $73,550.
Right.
I'm suggesting to remove that because we're not getting to that project in this fiscal year, and that is a grant. So you're going to see a reduction on the revenue side of $73,550 and a reduction on the expenditure side of $73,550.
And that 73, if I remember correctly, that grant, isn't that a matching fund
Yes.
grant? So our contribution is an equal amount, is that correct?
Yeah, well, somewhat, very close. It's going to be in the transfer tax fund where we were paying the city's part.
Right. So
Okay.
you'll see that come out of the transfer, out of it. Yeah,
Okay, but this represents the grant amount.
correct.
Correct.
The 73.5.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
As far as expenditures, we've adjusted to actual on some, we've adjusted based on projection for others. And that's, again, looking at where we are and where we anticipate ending.
So at this point, you're on page 2 of the shorter document.
I flipped over to page 2, yes. Again, on page 2, we've identified areas why we're recommending the increase. There was one under city manager, professional services consulting. That's account 100-520-5266, an increase of $15,000. And that's because of the national community survey that we had done. And additionally, we are budgeting for a facilitator for the short-term rental
Right.
discussion that we hope to get into.
Okay.
I have no idea what that, it's a sheer estimation.
It's the best guess.
Yeah.
Yes. Some of the committees and commissions, you're going to see just a reallocation. So I looked at their budget, and if there was room, I just moved an expense up or down, but then kept the same overall committee budget amount. In most cases, there were some where they were like $250 over their budget. So, but it's very minor. That's why you see a lot of pedestrian, bike and pedestrian
Right.
safety entries. You see historic entries, you see art committee.
Right.
That's what that's about. It's just better aligning and showing in the budget the expenditures as they've been posted.
So these actually are reflecting costs that have been incurred, is that correct?
With some projecting, if I anticipate, like secretarial, clerical, those are minutes. So
Right.
if we
Right.
expect that, we're going to have more committee meetings that require minutes, then we will take that into account and adjust accordingly.
I'd like to see that go down.
What's the additional amount that's going to spend on mitigation?
That's a reduction.
Oh, it's a reduction.
It's a reduction. So we had budgeted, I believe, 35, and the expenditures are coming in lower.
And that has to do with the Phragmites control, things
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
And that was at the mitigation planning meeting.
We talked about, yeah,
Chatham talked about areas that don't need to be treated again.
because the spraying has been effective, so.
Right.
So that's actually a savings.
Yes.
then.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
All these decreases in expenditures are actually, in effect, savings, okay?
Yes.
Well, you know what? Okay, all right, thank you.
So Marina, we've seen a number of reductions, and then we get into operating, which starts at 105.90, 52.10.
Right,
The finance bank charges, those are credit card fees. And so we expect they'll go up from our budget. I think we budgeted 80,000. We expect they'll go to 90 by the end of the fiscal year. And we are looking at that expense,
Thank you.
and we're seeing if we can see any savings due to the activity, the volume of transactions that we have. And council may wish to pass the charges on to the card user. Currently, the city pays for all of those fees. We do not pass those charges on
So
to the
this
user.
is for the people, for example, who pay their property taxes?
Correct. Property taxes.
Everything by credit card.
We do assess the card user at the meter,
Right.
50 cents.
Right.
But it doesn't offset all the cost. It does offset a majority of it. Your smaller ticket items are more costly, but it does help, and it's similar to what we charge for Park Mobile.
Do you know what the percentage is that we pay in interchange fees? Is it between 3% and 4%?
It does fluctuate. It's hard to put an exact percentage on that because there are a number of credit cards out there, some with points, some with miles, everything. And so each one is weighted differently.
And it also depends on how you put them in. If they
Yes.
have to be manually entered as opposed to someone who enters them online.
If they are
So
keyed in.
there are so many different, it's a sliding scale.
Yes.
But I think you and I had a meeting with the Fulton people the other day,
Yes.
asking them for a reduction.
Yes.
To review, to see if there was any savings that could be
Is
realized.
there any luck with that?
We're starting that process, so we will stay tuned.
Did they show you any interest in that? Any
Yeah.
reason to be hopeful?
I think there may be. I know that the city is looking at, with our accounting software, to enable more users to pay invoices online. And with that means there is a provider only one provider that we can use.
Right.
So some activity will be coming away from our current merchant provider and be going to this other one because of the convenience of the user being able to pay online.
Well, I think we can look at our parking meter fees and the fact that both Park Mobile and credit cards are passing along a 50-cent charge and to the consumer who's using them. And from that, we can deduce that the consumer is liking the convenience.
Yes.
And so it's realistic to expect that we may be able to pass along some of these credit card charges in another format for other things that people are using them for, whether it's building permits or property taxes or other fees, leaf
a convenience.
pickup, or
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so we'll be exploring that as we enter into FY23 budget process. So as far as operating, we've seen an increase there. I believe the others, the consulting. We spoke in the beginning that we saw a revenue increase of $10,050 relating to the study that AECom did.
Right.
So if you're looking at account 100-590-5266, consulting,
It's at the top of page 3.
yes, there's that corresponding increase in expense. $10,050.
Thank you.
If you go to the line above it, legal is a significant increase. I think that's just based upon our projection of where we think we'll end at the end of the year.
Well, it's also, yeah.
Okay. That is safe.
I'm sorry, does that include legal fees? That's legal
Yes.
fees?
That's what
Yes,
it is.
all
That's what I
legal.
thought. Okay.
All legal.
So we had budgeted,
and outside counsel?
yes,
Yes.
Right.
we had budgeted 300,000, so this would bring it to 400,000.
And how does, I haven't looked at that line item in last year's budget in this document, the bigger document. That's about the same as last year's, I recall, isn't it?
I think it's a little higher, but
I
it's
mean, it's
along,
within 10%.
yeah.
350 is what it was last year in the budget. Oh, or 300, excuse me. Oh, 350.
Yeah, it was more than
350.
350.
And we spent 354.
Yep.
So we're now
Year
budgeted.
before, it was 462, so.
Right. Year before.
So we're trending in the right direction.
Well, yes and no. But
I was joking, like, go Glenn.
how did you think you? No, never mind.
Okay, so then you go further down on that same grouping of 10540, 5541, grant tennis courts, that's the removal of the grant expenditure side of it.
Correct.
The other thing I want to draw your attention is it's on the revenue side and it's on the expenditure side, and that is the receipt of the ARPA federal money, increasing revenues by $896,000 and showing the expenditure of $896,000. Do I think we're going to expend all that by March? No. But I'm showing it in here.
That way.
And is that why there's the huge delta in the adopted budget versus the proposed? It's all ARPA, that 1.6 million delta is all ARPA?
The increase in revenues of 900, almost 950,000, 896 of it is for ARPA.
Yeah.
Same way with the expenditure side.
Because the second half of ARPA hasn't been booked yet, has it?
Correct.
And that we won't see that till next fiscal year.
Correct.
Right. And are we, for accounting purposes, the fact that there is that chunk of money, it's called ARPA money, that's already, that has special allocations associated with it.
Yes, it has to be spent according to that report.
Yeah.
And yet we are correct to book it with our general funds, is that correct?
We are able to do that. We'll show the expenditure of that money in a grant, the same grant expenditure account, 100-590-5545.
Right.
We have a separate bank account set up just for that ARPA money, and that's
I
it.
see.
Perfect.
Okay.
So it'll all
So it
come
would
out.
be just against that, drawing against that, drawing
Any
against that.
expenses will come against
Thank you,
that.
thank you for that.
Okay.
So as the last thing that I want to talk about in the general fund is, you can see it on page 1 of the short document. It is account 100-499-0000, other revenue, prior year reserves. So when the 22 budget was adopted, there was a number put in that line, I believe it was around $518,000, which is the amount that we needed to balance the budget for FY22 for the general fund only. As a result of the changes, taking out the ARPA change, the other changes, we are needing less of that prior year reserve. So we are going to see a decline of that need by 53%. So we're going from 518 down 277,000. So there'll be less of a draw.
Yeah, that
The
was a good
delta
thing.
will be what we're actually.
These are in Washington.
Yeah, but you can watch my money any day.
No, not quite. They need a lot of other things in Washington, too. So
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to mention that.
that's a very good sign.
Yes. absolutely.
However, let's be realistic, we're pulling out some things that should have been done this year.
Well, you know,
Well, I think they're going to be reflected in the other funds.
But what I'm saying is,
Yes.
well, not a whole lot, 73,000, you know, tennis courts. and,
yeah, the 73,000.
You know, there's not a whole lot of other things that
Right,
we're
but that-
pulling out.
That expense, that 73,000 that we're paying out of city funds is not in the general fund. So really, the big difference in the general fund is, you know,
54,000.
right.
4,000, yeah.
I mean, the parking really,
Yeah, the parking came in,
Yeah, it's $20,000 in parking.
yeah, that came in good.
Yes,
That made a big difference.
it made a huge difference. And the building permit.
Yeah, the building permit and the parking thing really is what offset it. Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions on general fund recommended changes?
No.
That's the short page, short
That's the
document?
short document.
Okay.
We're going to continue with the short document because right after, it's on page 3, right after general fund, we get into municipal street aid.
Right.
And there is just a minor change in municipal street aid. We're adjusting 2 expenditure lines,
Page 3, this is, please?
page 3,
I'm sorry.
Page 23.
The back page, right?
municipal street aid.
Wait a minute, I'm look, wait a minute.
Right here.
Oh, that's
Count
what I saw.
200.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
Municipal street.
Street,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm with you.
So we are increasing an expenditure by $2150 to show the expense for engineering of the lighting in the beach parking lots. And we saw a savings in the purchase of the leaf vac of $3,000. So when you net the increase of expense of $2150 against the savings of $3,000, that means $850 difference.
What is the status, Emery, of the design for the parking lot lighting? Because I noticed this morning that when I was walking that we have 4 lights that are completely out.
Oh, are there?
Well, we can have those
Yeah, that's
prepared.
corrected, but-
At this point, I believe council had put it on hold at a prior capital projects meeting.
But I think we need to go back and look at it because they're still uneven. We need to talk about that at some point.
Okay.
Because they're really beat up. And I know the first estimate that came in was very, very high. And I think we need to, take a look at it.
I was thinking that the design work had already been completed for that.
Well, the original design work was, but it came in very high. I think it was like
Oh, so we're going to go back.
300,000 is what I recall.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so then we can move on to general capital projects, which is the next fund below municipal
Yep.
street aid. It starts with 400. It's on page 25 of your big budget document. This is the fund where, when we spoke of the building permit for the assisted senior living, and we took the gross, we took out for any fees that the city would have to pay, we're left with $390,850. That is the net of that building permit. So this is showing the movement of that revenue from general fund to the general capital projects. And you're going to see that as 487.
Got it.
There were a couple other lines above that, just based upon our investments at UBS that were just trending a little lower than where we had it budgeted. I'll come back to the prior year reserves in a second after we talk about the expenditures. I believe council approved the purchase of a new trash truck. This is showing that debt service payment. The lease company prefers the city align its payments on the fiscal year, so we'll be paying a lease payment from November through March, and then come April, we'll pay for the full 12 months.
Okay.
So that's why that's set.
It's just a 6-month payment.
May I ask a question about that particular rental? Have we actually taken delivery of that truck? That's in the future, isn't it? Like more than
Couple
is it
weeks.
a year out?
No, that one is a couple weeks away.
Oh, just a couple
That's
weeks?
the thing we just
Okay.
did.
Oh, I knew we just
Yeah.
did it, but I was thinking in delivery of it was tied
Future
up.
trucks, we were going to be on like a year and a half out.
Right, but not the trash.
No, not this
Okay,
one.
that's where I was a little
Oh, yeah,
confused.
right, I see what you mean.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
The next line is maintenance is requested a utility body truck to help with facilities, and this will enable them to store a lot of their equipment on the vehicle that they are able to drive around to the different parks and city buildings to provide service and maintenance. That'd be more efficient because they'll have the tools with them ready. This is an estimate on how much we think that vehicle will cost. If approved, the next big task will be finding one, because there is a delay in that as well.
Okay, and that cost includes, is fitted out, correct?
It has
Is that-
the boxes in the back,
whatever they're
and
called,
yes.
right? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So the final account, 400,590,5490, GCP reserve, is part of the conversation we need to have when we talk about the prior year reserves. So when the adopted budget for '22 was approved, there was a draw on prior year reserves of $80,260. Because of the building permit that got moved in, now
You don't have to.
we'll have 224, almost 225,000 going into a reserve for future use. So it's a switch.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this fund does not typically have a good, stable revenue funding source.
Right.
So the influx of the building permit revenue has certainly helped by making it more stable and providing for future years. Is it as much as transfer tax? No. I think we can still have discussions about what is a possible stable funding source for this fund. But the 225,000 certainly does help.
You talked about that, as I recall, in previous budget preparations and so
So
forth.
before the building permit, what went into this fund were the payments to purchase trash trucks. We make an annual payment out of the general fund into this fund to fund for the trash trucks. And then if there's a street rehabilitation project, the sidewalk portion that the property owner pays goes into this fund. We have recently moved the franchise fee from Chesapeake
Into this.
into this fund.
Good.
We also keep a separate account for the Chesapeake. That money hasn't been spent. It's still accruing as we receive.
And we do not treat the franchise fee from the cable, from Comcast, the same way, is that correct?
No, we've always budgeted in the general fund.
Okay, and there's franchise fee from Verizon, I believe
We don't
also? No,
receive-
there's no? Okay.
The franchise fee from Verizon goes to the board. If there's cable attachments.
Yeah, that's true.
attachments,
You're
that
right,
goes to the board.
you're right. Okay, but for Comcast, that goes into our general fund?
Yes.
Okay, that's something for us to think about. All right.
Are there any questions on general capital projects? Okay. So on the page 4 is transfer tax, and that's on page 27. So this is where the entire 1.5% transfer tax is deposited. Okay, so let's start with
That down there. Oh, it's trash.
the first line, 460-402-0000. This reduction is not saying that we are expecting transfer taxes to be less than what we budgeted. We're expecting transfer taxes to maintain.
Yeah.
All this does is move $175,000 from the main transfer tax line to the one below it.
Right.
Sales greater than $3 million. Because that's where we're at right now. At the end of September, we collected $175,000 in transfer tax for sales greater than $3 million.
The sales of properties are
Correct.
greater than 3 million.
And what is
Correct.
can you explain to me what the logic is for separating, that?
I believe there was an interest from previous council to identify that revenue source.
It's called windfall, right, or?
It was called windfall or
Yeah.
unusual circumstances
Yeah.
that you wouldn't anticipate on a regular
There used to be a
basis.
separate account for windfall, right? But
There
after
used
all
to-
of this, and now
And
you
you
just
changed
say,
it.
Yes, it
same
would go.
account, but
Okay.
beware, you only got one of these this year.
Well, and
There was a
what-
couple
what
of
this
them.
is suggesting is we've had more.
Yeah.
Okay, and we may have more.
And it's not allocated in any way,
No.
is it? Okay.
No.
Thank you.
So then the next line of $10,000 increase, that's the building tax. That we are at $65,000. We budgeted $60,000. It's possible we'll make $70,000. So that's why I recommended a $10,000 increase. And this is for properties that have been in less than a year that a property is being constructed on. So there's an additional 1.5% tax.
Given the number of homes that have been scraped over on the beach, I think that have been purchased in the past year, it looks very probable.
Yes.
I can't quite remember the detail about that tax. I know it's applicable to residential properties. Is that applicable also to commercial? It's across, and it's the same percentage, same tax?
Yes.
Is that correct? Thank you.
Eleanor, could you just talk me through, in terms of when these are realized, because looking at the proposed, we're about halfway there, but are we halfway through our fiscal year? Like, that's right today, like, basically today, we're halfway through, so.
Well, for example, September transfers, we don't receive until October.
Okay,
So you're not seeing the September transfer in there yet.
okay.
You will in the October report, but then we'll be behind for October.
Oh,
This is
Yeah,
half year,
right.
so the actual is a very good half-year mark.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, but you had the windfall of the previous March that came in April. Okay, so you'd really have 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. So we're confident to get to the 2.7, 2.6 at least.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Again, we'll save the prior year reserves discussion for a little bit.
Okay.
Go down to the expenditures, finance bank charges. I think those are some just miscellaneous charges that we hadn't budgeted that we are creating a budget for. Then we get into maintenance streets, engineering, and construction. These are for projects as indicated under the reason. We adjusted for the Phase 24 project. We adjusted for the Adams Avenue last week at the capital projects. Our engineers provided estimates on Adams Avenue, and I think there was a reduction in that fee from 71 to 51, I believe. The Phase 25 project, we've adjusted that price, and then we've included Phase 26, so we can at least start design work on that. And I think this was anticipation of the possibility of any federal money being available. We wanted to have it ready to roll
Ready to
if
go.
possible.
Right.
Okay. Engineering, a reduction of 11,300. That is where we had previously budgeted 21.5 for the PD. What did we say? The architectural programming and schematic design, I think that's coming in less.
For the PD.
I did include the architectural and structural inspection for the Fisher Martin House. I believe that was also discussed at the capital projects meeting.
Eleanor, where, I had not paid attention to this particular line item before. Our engineering costs, the consulting engineer relationship with GMB, where would that be captured in here?
So if it's for a specific project, then it's going to be with the project. So if it's
Okay.
for Phase 24, it's going to be in the transfer tax. There are some projects that we ask our engineers to complete work on that we haven't assigned a project, and those expenses are in the general fund under engineering.
That's where that is. Okay.
On page 20. Line 100, 590, 5270.
I believe we're under budget in that.
Yeah, so we've got 150,000 budgeted, and as of the end of September, we've spent $67,476.85.
Yep, thank you.
Well, on that, sticking with that, the shovel, the idea of shovel-ready projects, I mean, maybe this is a next capital needs discussion, but are there some of these that may be worth spending some more engineering studies so that we're have some of these ready to go if there are more infrastructure monies that could come our way?
What do we have in the hopper so far as on the shelf, ready to go?
I'm looking to get Charlie, more business.
Yeah, most of the street rehab does not require a lot of engineering because it's mostly mill and overlay. So the big one is the Monroe Adams Railroad, which we're starting the engineering phase now.
That's the biggest one.
And that would, and honestly, I think that would be one that if we're going to try to get federal money, because that is a big ticket item, that's probably what we would try to
That
get
would be
it.
the one we'd go with. Okay.
Okay. The next line of construction. So we looked at, again, removing the tennis courts.
73,000.
I reduced it. I didn't remove it completely. I reduced it down to 25,000, where it was previously budgeted 82,915, because we've spent 15,000. So it's reducing that. It's adjusting the Rollins Center restroom to what was the bid we received. It is also including the police department. Now, the number you see for the police department of 100,000, that does not include furniture. It includes everything, including the anticipated repairs we will need to correct the flooding problem. The furniture of 25,000 is in the general fund.
That makes sense.
So there was some grant money that we might be able to allocate from the county towards that?
There is 35,000 from the county. We have previously used that for vehicles.
Okay.
It can be used for police, some of their capital items. Half of it can only be used for operating of the police department. so is that clear about what I've included or how I arrived at the 100? Okay. So, with all of that in mind, we had previously budgeted a drawdown of reserves in this fund of $656,015. Based upon the changes that have been presented, we need to increase that draw an additional $261,000. So the prior year reserve pull would be $917,475. And that you can see on page 27 of your big document. The cash balances in the transfer tax fund, including investments, as of September, were $5.18 million. The questions on the transfer tax? Okay. The last fund is the Fisher Martin House. That's on page 28. There were a couple, interest was minor. The biggest adjustment that I thought here would be for the improvements to the Fisher Martin House. The adjustment that I made did not draw down on all of the funds. It left a little bit. But I thought that we could budget $34,500 from this fund to make some improvements. Is that going to be all that we need? I don't know. I don't think so. But it's providing at least a source for some of those repairs, especially those that are mostly needed going into winter.
Some of those things may be eligible for historic funding.
I guess the question, typically that would come through our CLG grant. So that would be, like in the past, we've been using the CLG for the survey, so that would be,
I wouldn't rule out the possibility we could find other sources through the National Trust.
okay.
Yeah, there seems to be money, floating around right now that might be able to be accessed.
And this fund that you speak of for the Fisher Martin House, is that a private fund that is?
It's all city. We
It is all city.
receive some dividends.
So we don't have any private money coming
No.
for that at all.
Well, I
It was
just
set up-
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So how, I guess, so the funding source is just last year's budget, is that correct?
We get small dividends from this, and we have an investment with UBS that is managing that stock.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Don't we get revenue from the chamber?
no.
No, I started to say no.
Condition of the building being given to the city was it had to be open to the public on a steady basis. There is no revenue from the chamber.
And what about the expense of the utilities at that
And so the
building?
chamber keeps it open.
Just,
We
We pay
to
for that.
double check, I don't think we do pay for the utilities.
They pay their own
I
utilities.
think they do.
okay. My question, Khalil, is, I have a question, is,
You asking me a question?
I'm asking
Don't go there.
everyone present. I just want to make sure you were listening. It seems to me that, first of all, I don't know this building. I mean, I know where it is, but I don't know its needs, is what I, and as far as I know, the architect hasn't done her study to advise us what its needs are. It seems to me that there is the possibility that the renovations in this building are significant enough that we're not talking about maintenance, we're actually talking about capital improvements.
Yes.
And so doesn't that mean that we should be thinking of this as a different funding source rather than calling it maintenance?
What I was trying to budget were the items that needed immediate attention. Now, is it going to be $34,500? I have no idea.
The bottom line is it does need major, but right now you're just trying to mend it.
Based upon estimates we've gotten,
Right.
it could use this.
Yeah.
Just
It's
to-
major.
Put Band-Aids on
And
it.
you're right, it should probably be looked at capital.
Right.
But
And
yes,
so if we were to act on the Band-Aid approach, and then with the budget prep that we do in the winter for next year, would we, and if by that time we have the architect's recommendations and so forth, and we have an idea what the scope of work is and what our costs are, would we then be looking at putting that in, moving that out of the maintenance budget?
I see it coming out of transfer tax if we can't find other funding sources.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. Just want to make sure I'm following
I
that.
think it's important to note that the original $34,000 that we're talking about that's sitting here was not city money ever. It was gifted.
Right.
Okay, so
But it was not money.
it's
that
not
was-
tax money.
It is not revenue that
Yeah,
the city
right.
put into this fund.
Okay, well, so then so it's designated from a
Specifically.
outside party.
Right,
When the
exactly.
building was
So it
set
was
up.
Exactly.
And you can see
And we
this,
should, if we're going
So-
to do work on it, we eventually have to move it into the capital.
And when we received that gift, was it stipulated how it could be spent?
Fisher Martin House.
Just generally Fisher Martin House? It wasn't towards maintenance or anything else, just Fisher Martin House?
We typically don't pull expenditures from this fund for any, very rarely. I think the last one we may have done like a heating unit, but it's very infrequent.
Everything else has been, they've done a lot of improvements to the interior out of their own monies.
The Chamber House?
We're not required to keep this fund specifically open for Fisher Martin, like, so once it's exhausted.
Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, I say, once
Get rid of it.
And it doesn't fund
It now
itself. That
becomes
person
ours.
isn't,
Unless-
sugar daddy's not around.
No.
Right.
Well,
It was stock that was donated
I see.
with it, and
With
then,
the designation.
unless there
right,
were,
and then we liquidated the stock and put it into the UBS investment.
I see.
and should someone make a specific bequest, then Fisher Martin House would remain.
Yeah,
You know, the Fisher Martin account.
right, the account will stay, right. Huh, thank you for
Sure.
that explanation.
So those were all the changes that we identified as wanting to bring forward for approval. If there's any other questions, I'll be glad to.
Thank you very much, Ellen Ray. It was an excellent job. The way this sheet was laid out.
Well done.
And synchronized with this
Exactly.
sheet. Extremely well done. I think you've given us a very good overview. Are there any other questions?
Actually, I think I might have a question.
Well, that'd be different.
Hold on now. Let me find where I wrote my note.
I think he said one question.
This is not a curveball question, but I did have a few minutes before coming to the meeting to look at this budget. The costs that were incurred last year during the wintertime, I think it was during this winter, yeah, there were dredging costs associated with work that was done along the canal. That would show up, where would that show up in this document?
So the city's part would show up under Marina,
Okay.
and that would be,
That's not Parks and Marina
no,
Administration.
that's
no.
on page 18.
Further back.
And that
there.
is, yes, account 100-580-5290. We budget 40,000,
Year.
yes.
Annually, we budget
We
for
do that annually, that's an annual amount.
Right.
Okay.
But if you look, the dredging that was done last year is in the FY 2021 actual. So you can see that was 84,000.
Right.
Yes, right.
Right.
Which I think prompted us to up our budget to 40.
We were originally budgeting 30.
Anything else, sir?
Maybe. No, that was just one that stood out for me that I, thought of.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is an actual meeting, so we could adopt this proposed budget here tonight, this revised budget.
Right.
So unless there are further questions.
I mean, I just want, Ellen, Ray, to summarize one more time, just for the public before we do this, is the 16% increase in the adopted budget, just a simple explanation for the public on that.
So the reason for the increase is mainly to reflect the receipt of the ARPA federal money of $896,000. So when revenues are increased by $950,000, $896 is for the ARPA funds. Same is true for the expenditure side.
Thank you for that. I just want to be clear, I don't want to come across as the city council's, midway through increasing the budget arbitrarily for 15% or whatever it is. So.
Well, and you can see that we, in all probability, we're not going to expend this money. So, I mean, this is a windfall that came to us, and there'll be a similar one next year.
The other thing, for the benefit of the public, that Ellen Lorraine did mention, but I do think it's worth mentioning again, is that, I'm not going to find it, the prior year reserves.
Right.
The transfer from prior year reserves on page 5
Okay.
was originally budgeted at $518,485. And if you recall, when you adopted the budget, we cautioned that this isn't a practice that we want to do regularly, but with the pandemic and the uncertainty, and that we had healthy reserves, that this would be the type of situation when you do that. But based on the revenues and the increase in some of the revenues and the reduction in the expenditures, that transfer is reduced by almost 54%,
Right.
down to $239,915.
Good point, yes.
That's, revenues are up over what was anticipated when we put the budget together, but we really used the bulk of that to offset what we would have pulled from prior year reserves.
And most of that is parking.
We could increase our inventory that way, with the garage.
You have to look at the expense of a garage.
He's always stirring the pot.
There is a point at which it doesn't become, I get what you're saying, but you have to have the site for it, too. All right, so unless there's further questions, is there a motion to approve this revised budget as presented by Ellen Lorraine?
Yes, I make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Andrew. So we have a motion and a second to approve this budget as revised. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the budget has been adopted. We'll look forward to seeing next month, actually, when we'll have an actual report as to what the total parking revenue was, and we may even want to come back and revise it further. So, anyway, unless there's something further to bring forward, I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Looks like we got it everywhere. Meeting adjourned. It is now 5:54, 4:54, excuse me. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Very efficient use. Lorraine, your explanation really saved us a lot of time. Thank you very much.
Very well
Good job.
done.
Good
Thank you,
job.
appreciate it. Nice job, kiddo. Don't walk by any fans, bud. You've already got your shave.